actually quite a powerful pump, but it is really struggling to move water around the loop. But these tiny little fittings are definitely a classic bottleneck. Okay, there we go. We just hit 33 degrees on our phone CPU. So that's exactly the same starting point that we had when we were running it by itself without any active cooling. So it's time to strap it on. Plonk this on a little something like, ooh, we just put a zip tie on it or something. Now again, this is not designed for long-term use. Obviously, you wouldn't want a big, ugly zip tie hanging out in the middle of your screen if you're gaming. But you don't realize how light a phone is until you strap a big piece of copper to the back of it. Like, it's heavy. And our benchmark results are actually well within range for OpenGL, but a little bit higher for Vulkan. Let's go ahead and run it again. Run number 2, our score is still exactly the same. Okay, it's jumping around a little bit, but wow. It looks like our temps haven't increased at all. This is now 3 runs in, and our performance hasn't dropped at all. By comparison, last time around on the 3rd run, we were at only 72% of our peak performance in OpenGL and only 75 in Vulkan. So we were already at our maximum throttle. We haven't even touched it yet. Okay, so the CPU temperature does go up. We can see that, but it rapidly falls. So our cooler here is doing an excellent job of pulling that heat away. And once again, our benchmark scores are not affected whatsoever. In fact, that's our best score yet for OpenGL. I think this is going to be our last run. I'm pretty convinced that this is not going to throttle. Just for funsies, here's a look at the phone through our thermal camera. Now, this is an imperfect way of measuring it because it's a bit of a glossy surface, so that does interfere with our reading. But we can at least see, relatively speaking, where the hot spots are. Right there is one of the hottest spots of the phone along that edge, and even that is well under control. It barely feels warm to the touch, even while I'm running this game benchmark. So there you have it. Our scores still haven't fallen this entire time, and our temperatures start out a little bit on the higher side, but quickly fall back down to ambient temperature. So, is it a bit of a janky solution? Yeah. I think even under the best of circumstances, this is going to be bulkier and less convenient than just, relaxing in bed with just your phone. But does it work? The answer is a resounding, absolutely yes, it does. Water cooling phones. Who would have freaking thunk it? Speaking of who would have thunk it, who would have thunk that I would transition so seamlessly to our sponsor, PIA. Private Internet Access supports a variety of VPN protocols and types of encryption and authentication, allowing you to dial in the exact level of privacy protection that you need. They've got apps for Windows, macOS, Android, iOS, Linux, and Google Chrome, and they've got over 3,000...
Hey, 42 here. Conspiracy theorists are often mocked and called tinfoil hat-wearing loonies. But, whatever people may say, they have gotten the occasional thing correct. And sometimes the truth is even scarier than speculations and theories. These are the terrifying conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. We start with the conspiracy of the MK Ultra project. The theory goes that between 1950 and 1973, the CIA carried out top secret and disturbing mind control experiments on US citizens. Unfortunately, the theories turned out to be very true. In 1995, President Clinton actually issued a formal apology on behalf of the US government for the atrocities that they committed. The experiments carried out as part of the MK Ultra project were highly illegal. All of the test subjects were unwilling, and the experiments involved drugs, electronics, hypnosis, sensory deprivations, verbal and sexual abuse, and torture. In order to distance the projects from the US government, the CIA subcontracted the work to 80 different institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. 20,000 classified MK Ultra documents were uncovered to the public in 1977 under the Freedom of Information Act, which confirmed people's suspicions. However, the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, had most of the more damning MK Ultra files destroyed in 1973. So much of what happened during the experiments is still unknown to this day. Next up is the Great Diamond Conspiracy. During the late 1870s, when huge diamond mines were opened in South Africa, it was suspected that the diamond supply was actually far greater than advertised, and that the price of diamonds had been artificially inflated. Conspiracy theorists believed that diamonds were actually worthless. Well, they couldn't be closer to the truth. Until the 19th century, diamonds were only found in very small quantities in riverbeds in India and the jungles of Brazil. However, in 1870, huge diamond mines were found in South Africa, and diamonds were soon being mined by the truckload. Very soon, the market was flooded with an excessive amount of diamonds. The British investors who funded the diamond mines soon realised that the prices of diamonds rested solely on the fact that they were so rare. If too many diamonds came into the market, their prices would plummet. Diamonds would no longer be a precious stone, and their investment would be worth absolutely nothing. So, what did they do? The investors realised that they had to restrict the supply of diamonds to keep the prices high. So, in 1888, the handful of British diamond mine investors banded together into a single entity to form a cartel called De Beers Consolidated Mines. In one fell swoop, they had completely monopolised the diamond market worldwide. The global selling price of diamonds was now completely under their control. The De Beers Corporation achieved this by stockpiling massive quantities of diamonds in London warehouses and only releasing a tiny amount into the market each year to create an illusion of scarcity. But De Beers soon realised that only wealthy individuals were actually buying their diamonds because the prices were so high. So, they needed a way to encourage the working and middle classes to buy diamonds. So, in 1938, they came up with one of the greatest scams of the modern day. They invented the diamond engagement ring. De Beers utilised the newly emerging medium of motion pictures to plant the idea in the heads of young men worldwide that the only stone acceptable for an engagement ring was a diamond. They paid Hollywood movie studios to include scenes within their movies of young men proposing to their loved ones with a diamond engagement ring. They also launched a massive advertising campaign with the slogan, "A diamond is forever." The campaign was an enormous success. Before their campaign, only 10% of engagement rings sold worldwide had diamonds on them. After the campaign, 80% had diamonds. In a short few years, the De Beers Company had artificially inflated the global price of diamonds and brainwashed the entire world into thinking that these worthless hunks of carbon are the only way to propose to a woman. To this day, their mass manipulation is still deeply rooted in society. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was a major event in 1964 that was one of the biggest contributing factors to the start of the Vietnam War. However, conspiracy theorists say that the event never actually happened. The story goes that the US destroyer ship USS Maddox engaged three North Vietnamese Navy torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin near Vietnam as part of a US intelligence patrol. The Maddox fired an incredible 300 shells. That much is true. However, in 2005, a study by the NSA revealed that there weren't actually any Vietnamese naval vessels present during the incident whatsoever. USS Maddox was firing at absolutely nothing. In 1965, President Johnson actually said, "For all I know, our Navy was shooting at whales out there." Next up is the conspiracy theory that between 1932 and 1972, the US Public Health Service were deliberately not treating syphilis patients as part of a clinical study to see what would happen to syphilis patients if left untreated. Unfortunately, this turned out to be very true. 399 rural African American men were chosen by the US Public Health Service who were suffering from syphilis. The health service never even informed these men that they had a sexually transmitted disease, and they never offered them treatment of any kind, despite the treatment for syphilis being widely available. The victims were simply told that they had bad blood, and their symptoms were inevitable. By the early 1970s, 128 of the 399 men had died of syphilis. 40 of their wives had also contracted the disease, and 19 of their children had been born with congenital syphilis. Next up is the theory that the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the US military created plans to fake acts of terrorism against US citizens on US soil in a Cuban false flag attack to persuade the American public to support the war against Cuba. It's completely true, and the official documents can now be found online. The plan, which was drawn up by the US military, involved shooting down innocent Americans on the streets, planes full of innocent people being hijacked and shot down, and other extremely violent bouts of terrorism taking place against the American public in Washington, D.C., Miami, and elsewhere across the US. The plan was approved and ready to go into action, but thankfully, President Kennedy rejected it. Perhaps one of the most well-believed conspiracy theories is that your own government is spying on you. We've all had that paranoid feeling at some point in our lives that someone, somewhere, is watching us. Maybe it was George Orwell's 1984 that started it all off, or just a general distrust of the government. But whatever started the theories, the scary truth is, your government is watching you. And it's not just in America that it's happening. In recent years, there have also been disturbing reports of other countries spying on their own citizens, such as France, Germany, China, Russia, Syria, New Zealand, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Of course, the most well-known of these spying scandals was when former NSA employee Edward Snowden released sensitive government information revealing the frightening extent of the NSA's spying activities on American citizens under its surveillance program, codenamed Prism. Thanks to these revelations, we now know that the scope of the NSA's eavesdropping is even larger than what conspiracy theorists originally believed. But of course, all the spying is necessary to protect us from the likes of terrorists, is it not? Well, not exactly. A report by the Washington Post found that 90% of the sensitive data being collected by the NSA surveillance programs is from internet users with absolutely no connection to terrorist activities, making their spying activities downright illegal. For a long time, it's been theorized that professional wrestling is fake, and the outcomes of the matches are determined beforehand. It's always been a popular theory until recently, when it was confirmed to be true. In 2013, a mysterious Reddit user called Dolphins1925, who claims he has a contact inside the World Wrestling Entertainment Company, started posting the results of pay-per-view wrestling matches online before they actually took place. He posted the results of 38 matches, all of which he got correct, which proved once and for all that pro wrestling, well, at least in the case of WWE matches, are, as many suspected, set up. Between 1920 and 1933 in the US was the alcohol prohibition. For a whole 13 years, alcoholic beverages in any form were banned. As you would expect, this proved very hard to enforce. A lot of people were secretly making their own alcohol in their homes. The FBI were finding it increasingly more difficult to stop people drinking. Then, suddenly, people started dying from drinking alcoholic beverages. Many theories popped up that claimed that the FBI was intentionally poisoning liquor to deter people from drinking it. It's frightening to believe, but the theories were absolutely correct. The FBI's idea was that adding potentially fatal impurities to liquor, it would demonize alcohol in the eyes of the general public and stop people from wanting to drink it. Of course, they didn't tell the public about their nefarious plan. They let the consequences of the poisoned liquors do all the talking for them. The FBI added substances such as kerosene, chloroform, and acetone to bottles of liquor, and people started mysteriously dying of what many believed was simply alcohol poisoning. It's long been believed by conspiracy theorists the world over that the world is run by a group of rich men in powerful positions, and that they meet up every year to discuss secret plans. One such theory is that the world's elite meet up once a year in the middle of the woods and worship a giant owl effigy. Well, turns out it's true. It's called the Bohemian Grove. It's a 2,700-acre campground located in the woods of Monte Rio, California. Once a year, Bohemian Grove is host to a 2-week event involving some of the most powerful men in the world. During the event, they get drunk, put on strange plays in the woods, and burn an effigy in front of a giant owl statue. However, little is known about the event, and what exactly is discussed by the rich and powerful is kept top secret. Women aren't allowed to attend. Famous Bohemian Grove members have included Dick Cheney, both George Bushes, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, John Major, David Rockefeller, former CIA Director William Casey, Thomas J. Watson, and many more. And finally, conspiracy theorists believed that the CIA invented a heart attack gun that can be used to assassinate people without a trace. Turns out this is terrifyingly true. The weapon does exist, It was developed in the late 1960s. The gun was designed to be completely untraceable. It fires a tiny bullet about 3 millimeters wide that is made entirely of ice. This ice bullet has a lethal shellfish toxin frozen inside it. Upon entering the target, the bullet would leave only a tiny red dot on the skin, and the bullet itself would quickly melt, leaving no trace at all. The shellfish toxin causes a heart attack regardless of the target's physical fitness levels. The toxin itself denatures quickly, meaning an autopsy is unlikely to find any traces of it. It is a perfectly untraceable James Bond-style weapon. However, its existence was confirmed in 1975 when Senator Frank Church was forced to reveal the gun to a subcommittee who were investigating the CIA's illegal activities. Because assassinating someone on the streets who doesn't pose a significant threat to the state is illegal, even for the CIA. Even though its existence is now undeniable, theorists believe it is still being used by the CIA to this day. Andrew Breitbart may very well have been a victim. He was a media mogul who published derogatory stories about Barack Obama. He promised that he would shortly publish proof that Barack Obama's presidency was illegitimate. But he never got to do so, because shortly afterwards, on the 1st of March 2012, he suspiciously collapsed dead from a heart attack whilst walking in a Los Angeles neighborhood, despite being of relatively good health. Another possible victim of the heart attack gun was Mark Pittman, a financial journalist who sued the American Federal Reserve for mishandling taxpayers' money. However, before the case could come to a conclusion, Pittman died of a heart attack in very similar circumstances as Andrew Breitbart. Thanks for the view. Subscribe for more 42. Hey, 42 here. It's amazing what ridiculous stories get passed around the table at a dinner party, or when you're out drinking with your friends. I'm sure you've heard a few gruesome tales that sound too horrible to be true. Most urban legends are no more than Chinese whispers, told over and over again until no one can actually remember if there's any truth to the damn thing. But, very occasionally, it turns out that one of these creepy tales is actually completely true. And the real-life version is more horrific than you could ever imagine. If you spend long enough in western Pennsylvania, you will undoubtedly hear the spine-chilling tales of the Green Man. According to the urban legend, he was a horrifically disfigured man, with no face and glowing green skin. The Green Man apparently wandered the streets of Pennsylvania every night. Drivers would often report seeing this terrifying figure at the side of the road in the dead of the night. Turns out the real story is actually one of misfortune and loneliness. The Green Man was not a monster at all, but a man named Raymond Robinson. When Robinson was 8 years old, he was attempting to view a bird's nest and was electrocuted by some electrical lines of a nearby tram line. Robinson narrowly escaped death, but was left severely disfigured. He lost his nose, eyes, an ear, and one of his arms. The skin on his face was so badly damaged by the shot that it glowed with a green hue, hence his nickname of the Green Man. Robinson walked the roads of western Pennsylvania every night because he could not go outside during the day without causing mass hysteria. Next up is the shadowy figure. I'm sure that everyone has been witness to this urban legend. At some point in most people's lives, they've seen a shadowy figure dart across the room out of the corner of their eye, as if someone is there. But when they turn around, nothing. It's the oldest urban legend in the book. And stories of mysterious, shadowy figures have been told all throughout history. But for one man in Fukuoka, Japan, this urban legend turned out to be true. The man apparently lived alone in an apartment. He kept telling people how he saw shadowy figures moving around his apartment at the corner of his eye. He swore that things kept going missing from his apartment. The man claimed that someone was eating his food and moving things around. He reported an overwhelming sense that another being was present with him, and that he was far from alone. He was absolutely correct. One day he set up a hidden camera in the corner of his apartment, and to the man's horror, he captured footage of a woman slithering out of his cupboard and using his apartment as if it was hers, eating his food and using his belongings, even taking showers. The creepiest part of it all is that when he watched the footage back, the woman was still in his cupboard only a few meters behind him. The woman turned out to be 58-year-old Tatsuko Horikawa. She was homeless and admitted to the police that she had been secretly living in the man's apartment without his knowledge for the past year. There's an old folklore called Bloody Mary that goes like this. If you turn off all the lights, then light a candle and stare into a mirror and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, the face of Queen Mary I of England will supposedly appear in the mirror with a terrifyingly evil expression. In some versions of this urban legend, she apparently appears in the mirror holding a dead baby in her arms, which may be a reference to the number of miscarriages that Queen Mary I had. Now this may seem far-fetched, but there is some truth to this urban legend, and oddly enough, some science too. A lot of people who try this do actually see something peculiar in the mirror, and many perceive it to be the face of Queen Mary I, but it's not. What you're actually seeing is your own face heavily distorted due to something called a Caputo effect. This effect occurs because of sensory deprivation. Our eyes are being deprived of light, but our brain is trying its hardest to make out the face in the mirror. This causes the brain's facial recognition system to malfunction. The result of this is that what we see is a distorted version of our own face, which, in poor lighting, could be misconstrued to be the face of Queen Mary. Because most people who attempt this are expecting to see the face of an evil queen, that's what the brain makes us see. Our brain is deprived of visual information, so naturally our imagination fills in the gaps. There's an infamous story that many parents have told their poor children in an attempt to scare the living daylights out of them. The legend goes that a couple stayed in a hotel room and complained about a putrid smell. But when the hotel staff couldn't find anything out of the ordinary, they stayed there anyway. Later, they found that the cause of the smell was a dead body stuffed into the mattress. That's bloody nasty, but it has happened. In fact, it happens a lot more commonly than you might think. Cases of dead bodies in hotel mattresses have been reported in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, California, and Florida. A recent case occurred in 2010, when a Memphis woman was missing for 2 months before she was finally found, dead, under the mattress of a hotel room where she had been staying. In the 2 months, whilst her corpse had been rotting away under the mattress, the hotel had rented the room to 5 different people, and none of them thought to investigate the strange smell. The room had also been cleaned by hotel staff several times during those 2 months. I guess the cleaners just took one look at the dead body and thought, I don't get paid enough for this. According to urban legend, there's an unnerving tale of a family who moved into a new house. The story goes that a rancid-smelling, jet-black water came out of all the taps in their new home. When they investigated, they were horrified to discover that the cause of the black water was a decomposing human body in the water tank. It makes one's skin crawl to think that this could actually be true, but it is. However, the real story is so much worse because it happened in a hotel, not someone's home. In 2013, for a whole 19 days, hundreds of guests at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles were bathing in, brushing their teeth with, and even drinking the water from a tank on the rooftop that contained the decomposing corpse of a college student named Elisa Lam. Seriously guys, just stay away from hotels, they're bad news. We've all heard the horror stories of people who have been buried 6 feet under. presuming they were dead, but they weren't. Are the tales just urban myths, or is there some truth?
Over the course of the past few decades, we've gotten used to technology advancing at an unprecedented rate. As Moore's Law marched along, we saw bulky, room-sized computers get smaller, cheaper, and more powerful. And in more recent history, the desktop, to the laptop, to the smartphone. Now we have access to astounding computational power wherever we go, accommodating our each and every whim. Aren't we lucky? Arguably, it's something we take for granted. Instant access to all the information the world's greatest minds have compiled, all the finest artistic works from creative geniuses, and all 11 seasons of Frasier. Anywhere we desire, communication that can give us the capacity to find long-lost family members, or just send more pictures of your cat. But I mean, think about it. Even the smartphones from just a decade ago are laughably archaic by today's standards. Such a staunch difference between, say, the first iPhone and any of the flagship devices of 2019. As processors, displays, and wireless technology improved, the smartphone has evolved from a niche novelty to essential good. In the modern day, it's easily the most commonly used computing device, and as such, it's only natural a massively competitive market would arise to supply the demand. But what direction will the market take? Will it continue as we've become accustomed to it? Exponential growth in processing power, slimming down, or new innovations to blow our minds? That's a tough one. Sure, stuff will get better. It always does. But Moore's Law has limitations. And even more relevant, there's only so much we can do with the form factor of the smartphone. I'll get to that later. Something we do gotta stay cognizant of is falling sales numbers in the industry. While the market seemed boundless for most of the 2010s, less people are buying smartphones nowadays. Now, there's likely a few reasons for this. These dropping sales is partially because even smartphones from a few years ago can still perform the standard functions one would expect from such a device. I mean, stuff like checking social media, communication, watching videos. It's all generally stuff that doesn't require top-notch processing power, and modern mobile operating systems do a good job of giving us more bang for our buck. Though for many people, seemingly older devices can get the job done. Again, you can have a flagship from a few years ago and have a relatively comparable experience to modern devices. And this gap between newer and older models will shrink as the years go on. But let's get to that later. People will always need to buy new phones eventually. Natural degradation of batteries is just a process that happens. Sometimes you might accidentally leave it in your pants before putting in the washing machine. Good times. Good times. But regardless, technology marches forward, and a question needs to be asked. What's next for those seeking out the cutting edge? Well, if we follow trends in the market, a few things become evident. Manufacturers seem to be keen on eliminating bezels. Now, bezels are just that part of the front of your phone that isn't the screen. The more you know. Now, this isn't entirely unprecedented. Bezels have been shrinking in all forms of consumer electronics for decades. TVs to computers, nobody likes thick bezels. Now, surprise, surprise, bezel-less devices do exist, albeit not without compromise. See, the issue has been integrating a front-facing camera for you self-indulgent narcissists. Currently, the two solutions of managing this oh-so-essential feature involves implementing a notch into the screen or having a pop-up camera from the back. Both of these have their own faults, with the notch taking up screen real estate and the pop-up camera arguably compromising durability. Now, the ideal solution to this exists, at least in concept. Patents are out there for the possibility of putting the camera underneath the screen, which would allow for true bezel-less displays without silly, disgusting notches. So that's pretty cool, I guess. What I'm quite interested in is how this will make the front of each and every flagship smartphone basically indistinguishable. I mean, it's just a more appealing design, but it could result in some, let's say, homogeneous aesthetics. Not a huge loss, but it could make marketing new devices significantly harder when everything looks the exact same. Well, there's the possibility that these new foldable devices will capture the hearts and minds of the mass market. For those of you out of the know, foldables use OLED screens that can bend into wonderful, wacky shapes. It also offers the greatest potential to save us from the dull, uniform future of clean slates of flat glass. The form factor foldables could take diverts into several possible routes. Most likely concept to take off in the eyes of consumers right now is essentially making a phone that can fold out into a tablet. And yeah, it's possible other form factors could also work. Maybe something in vain of old flip phones could exist. The practicality of these concepts is giving the user both portability and larger displays when so desired. It's early days, and the tech isn't perfect yet, and it's possible the mass market isn't captivated by these kinds of devices. But hey, it gives me hope. Right now, the price of foldables is nearly double that of a standard phone, and arguably have hardware issues of their own. But surely the technology will decrease in cost over time, and I have no doubt these gadgets will find some niche. But hey, what if foldables just don't see widespread adoption? We still have some stuff to look forward to, right? Well, in terms of upgrading screen quality, I can see a few new standards coming to fruition. As we've seen the progression of LED to OLED to the now up-and-coming micro LED, lots of names, I know. Simply put, our screens got brighter, colors got better, and just expect that to get slightly more better. Micro LED really just consumes less power, but maintains the great color output of OLED. It's all cool stuff, at least to me, but maybe not a total revolution many people might expect considering how far we've come. Well, can screen resolution at least improve that? Well, I mean, it could, but it would be a gross waste of time. Resolution has finite usability, as a human eye can only perceive so much. 4K display on a 6-inch screen wouldn't look very different at all to a 1440p display. And all the while, the phone would have to dedicate more processing power to render more pixels that you wouldn't be able to see. But this is all just on the surface stuff. What about inside the phone? Processors get better year after year, and clock speed has been a long-running staple, giving people a reason to upgrade to the newest device. But in recent years, it's become less of a selling point for many people. After all, you can buy a flagship phone from a few years ago on the cheap that performs pretty close to the flagships of today. Not exactly, mind you, but the gap in perceived difference in real-world performance feels like it's diminishing. You open an app, it pops up quickly. Sure, you can look at Geekbench scores and come to a different conclusion, but as software becomes more optimized on mobile operating systems, it's only a matter of a few years before our older devices perform simply day-to-day functions virtually identical to their successors. There's a conversation to be had about these diminishing returns. Just because features can be added, it doesn't hold much relevance unless it serves significant purpose. Does the increase in clock speed actually affect the user experience? Currently, I think you can make a fair argument that you don't need this for most common applications. Operating systems are getting quite efficient at making the most of memory and clock speed. Stuff like social media, media consumption, they're just not the most strenuous tasks. That isn't to say that improving transistor counts won't have any effect. As the general rule goes, software will increase in complexity to accommodate this newer hardware, possibly in ways we can't even imagine yet. But in the near future, the concerns of lagging software will become less relevant, even when using hardware a few generations behind. How much power does the average consumer really need in their portable devices? I find the basic functions of what a smartphone is intended to do is starting to get pretty optimized. There's some hopeful options to circumvent this perceived stagnation of the industry. I mean, one very notable driving force is the somewhat malign mobile gaming market. It may be a bit awful at times, but it's surely ripe with potential to give incentive to march technology forward. While it's not the ideal way to, say, play games, I understand its relevance to many. Increased processors will always help that gaming market. There is a way that the need for ever-upgrading semiconductor chips could be offset by new advancing in, say, cloud computing. Cloud computing allows operations that would otherwise be too complex on physical, mobile hardware to be accessible through streaming. Basically just done on a fancy computer off-site and sent to you. This way you could play full-scale AAA games on hardware that normally couldn't run it. Now the potential for this is certainly reliant on bandwidth speeds, both via Wi-Fi and cellular data. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the new tech of 5G looks promising. Bandwidth speeds could surpass even home Wi-Fi with this tech, but it requires a compromise. These potentially blistering speeds come with limited range and direct line of sight to use. To actually implement 5G in any widespread capacity, we'd need to see a massive overhaul in infrastructure. New towers on every street corner. And personally, I don't think we'll see this kind of 5G access as something too commonplace for a good few years. Let's say in 2022, 2023, new phones launched that seem identical. Fancy bezel-less 1440p micro LED 5G phones that all function as quickly as we need. What else can we expect? Or what else do we need? What I'm really talking about is the seemingly optimized hardware market, a point where buying a new phone becomes less an exciting look into cutting-edge tech, and instead more like buying a home appliance. Possible a vast portion of the consumer market will simply buy a new phone every 5 to 6 years, as their older devices still hold up to modern standards. Yeah, it's good for consumers, but possibly not for manufacturers. We could see sales numbers continue to slump over the course of the 2020s. And yes, some things will still improve, giving some semblance of merit to yearly releases. Cameras are always getting better, battery capacity can increase, charging speeds can speed up. Face recognition and fingerprint sensors can still improve and offer more security while increasing accuracy and speed. But will that entice consumers? What about when every device seems effectively the same? Will we just need to see new form factor gimmicks to give consumers enough reason to upgrade from what has effectively become the standard flat slab of glass? I'm sure you'll see major manufacturers pushing any feature that differentiates a given device from the competition to an even greater degree than today. Maybe some more aesthetic changes, RGB lights on the back. Possibly falling into gimmick territory, but hey, it's subjective. Gotta sell the product somehow. And at the same time, it's important to remember what consumer electronics like smartphones are built for. Convenience, ease of use, speed. All things that do have their limits. There's a real possibility that hardware no longer makes a substantial improvement in the consumer experience. That increasing clock speeds doesn't add anything to daily usage. Now for the professional market, increased processing power will always be appreciated. But the smartphone isn't the optimal device for most instances of professional use. After all, they require low power consumption, are constrained to limited physical dimensions, and it just makes everything harder to combat overheating. So don't expect smartphones to surpass desktop devices. It's just physics. And yes, revolutionary technology will even make the most cutting edge of today seem archaic. At some point, graphing, specialized processors, advances in cellular data, all stuff that will eventually make their way to the consumer market. Innovations that will completely shift how we perceive technology in new directions. I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that software, rather than hardware, will be far more important going forward. After all, Moore's Law is coming to an end, and transistors can only get so small. But that's a topic for another video. In the meantime, what I think we should really contemplate is not how good a smartphone can get, but rather, how good do we really need them to be? Sure, there could be a market for 144 FPS ray-traced video games on mobile, but I feel much of those computations would be simply more effective via cloud streaming. When we get to that point, and if computational power is no longer the greatest concern for selling a device, the selling point becomes the physical way we interact with these things. But if your new device looks exactly like the old device, why upgrade? Surely foldable tech could become a massive trend that reinvigorates the mass market's interest in buying new devices. That remains to be seen. In the meantime, I think you'll see smartphones enter a new age here soon. Early smartphones were slow, dim, and notably dated by today's standards. As devices sped up, screen sizes grew to accommodate demand, and software became more optimized, we're starting to see users grow more content with keeping their old devices. As a few years pass, and further advancements are made, I can't help but think that the way we see the market will completely shift. Instead of an exciting industry with constant innovation, stagnation could set in. Buying a new phone might only be as exciting as, say, purchasing a new microwave. Nothing that hypes us up, but just another necessity. This is Tyler of Knowledge Hub. Thanks to all my patrons. If you want to support the channel, you can find a link in the description.
This video was sponsored by Novo Resume. If you have a paper and pencil nearby, go ahead and put 4 dots anywhere on the paper and connect them to make a quadrilateral. It doesn't matter how weird the shape is, and I'll just put a few examples here to illustrate that point. Now put a dot at the midpoint of all of those line segments you just drew and connect those to make another quadrilateral. Turns out no matter what, connecting those midpoints will always yield a parallelogram, or a shape where opposite sides are parallel to each other. The reasoning behind this is a theorem that says if you connect the midpoint